Hi TransByDef, this is Christine, and our topic this week is stealth dating. Now when the topic of stealth dating was first proposed, my initial reaction was, well, that's a good topic, but it's not one that I should contribute to. And so I had suggested that I would sit it out. And I did that not because I have absolutely nothing to say about stealth dating, but because I'm not stealth and I'm not dating, so what could I possibly say? Well, turns out that I actually have a lot to say about this topic because really when we talk about the topic, we're not talking about stealth dating. What we're really talking about is disclosure. And we're talking about a very specific time of disclosure. But before we can talk about the very specific time of disclosure, we have to talk about the assumptions behind the rights of people to know. The rights that they have to have it disclosed to them. And honestly, that's a topic I actually care about. And I don't care about it just a little. I care about it a lot because it affects me on a daily basis. So, why? Why do I care so much? Why do they have a right to know? Where does that expectation come from? Where does that assumption come from? Well, here's the thing. I think it comes from a place of privilege. A place of privilege from the cisgender world. And because it comes from a place of privilege, it's something that I actually want to tear down. Because it's really bad for trans people. I mean, it's bad for trans people because sometimes disclosure means, well, we're going to be lonely. And being lonely is really bad for people. It's not just a little bad, like, you know, if you breathe unclean air, well, that's a 5% chance that you're going to have an early death. If you're morbidly obese, that's a 20% chance that you're going to have an early death. If you're an alcoholic, and you are an alcoholic for a long time, that's a 30% chance of an early death. But if you're lonely, that's a 45% chance of an early death. And that comes because people, humans, are social creatures. We are from birth social, always dependent on other people around us. And we need that. And that's no less true for people that are trans than people that are not trans. And so, this whole idea that people have to disclose, that other people have a right to know our medical history, and then based on that medical history that they're going to discriminate against us, well, that's bullshit. Why do they think that? Well, they think that, I guess, as far as I can tell, they think that because they think we're crazy. They think we're nuts. And they're unaware of the research that says otherwise. You know, there's the BSTC studies of the brain, which show that there's a very clearly distinguished male and female region of the brain that can be identified. And it shows that trans women are women and trans men are men, in a very clear and concise way. Well, you know, if we have research that shows that there's a physical characteristic that identifies a good portion of the transgender population, well, now it's not just a psychiatric condition. And so saying that we're crazy is really crazy because there is a physical condition behind it. Now, it may not be DNA, but it's certainly our brains. And because it is physical, we are now intersex. And there's not just me saying that we're intersex. I mean, there's people like Milton Diamond, whose quote I shared earlier this week on TransByDef's Facebook page, who says that he believes trans people are intersex. Now, intersex people may take offense to this comment, but I base it on there are studies that show that there are physical characteristics that are different for trans people than for cis people. And because of that, it's not crazy. It's not a mental condition. Even beyond that, even if it was just a mental condition, the fact is that the best thing that people can do for trans people is let trans people be themselves. That's what the research all shows. That's what all of the research points to. And because of that, people ought to let us be ourselves. And making us disclose that so that they can take a reaction to us in opposition to us is insanity. You know, if our disclosure has no reaction that is negative, then maybe that would be a reasonable thing. But the fact is, in the society that we live in, saying that you're trans and identifying as trans means that you are bound to be discriminated against in your jobs, in your relationships, in everything that you do. Every aspect of your life takes a negative hit just by the fact that you're trans. And that's crazy. So, the concept of being required to disclose to make other people feel good about themselves, well, that's bullshit. And so, we're not going to talk about it from that perspective. Because disclosure, that's not required. It is a medical condition. You have a right to privacy on your medical conditions. Under no other circumstance would we ever disclose a medical condition that is of the nature of being trans. So, why would I disclose? Well, if somebody outright asks me at the beginning of a relationship, hey, are you trans? Well, I have two answers to that. Either I can tell them, you know, that's none of your business, and we're not going to talk about it. Or I could tell them, yes, I'm trans. I wouldn't tell them, no, I'm not trans, because that means I'm lying. And if I'm lying and I'm basing a relationship upon a lie, that relationship is bound to fail. I'm utterly convinced that every relationship based on entirely on lies like that is going to fail. Even a relationship where there's just small lies, those lies tend to eat away at the relationships, and it's never good. The results can only be negative. So in that case, if I'm actually interested in pursuing a relationship with someone who's asked me if I'm trans, well then the only options I have are tell the truth or tell them to go away. And if I want to pursue it, that means I have to tell the truth. So at that point I would be disclosing. The next condition under which I would be disclosing, and it would be more of a voluntary disclosure, is if I'm looking at being intimate with somebody. Now, this is true for me whether or not I would be post-op or pre-op. Either way, I would be disclosing. And I would be disclosing because at that point in a relationship where I'm thinking about sleeping with somebody, well, it's not like it's my first time meeting this person. I've decided that this is somebody that I'm interested in and that I'm going to share part of myself with. And so it's serious to me. It's real. And I'm vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable at least, if not physically vulnerable too. And so if I'm going to be physically and emotionally vulnerable to somebody, I'm going to want to disclose something that's, you know, pretty important to me. It's a pretty big part of who I am. I mean, it's not that they have a right to know it, but I have a right to talk about it. And it affects me. It means I do some things different. I look different. Parts of my body just don't quite match up. And even if I've taken all kinds of steps to make it look that way, there's probably still somebody somewhere who knows who's going to disclose it at some point. And, oh, that person just found out. And if it gets to that point where that person finds out that I'm trans, and it happens underneath different circumstances later in a relationship, again, it's going to feel like I was deceiving them to them. And even if it didn't feel like I was deceiving them, even if they could understand that I was telling the truth, it may have an impact to them. Now, while they don't have a right to know, I don't really want to be in a relationship with somebody who's going to, like, pull away from me as soon as they find out a piece of me. So I would rather just disclose everything at that point when I get serious about somebody. I'd rather have no surprises. I'd rather that person know exactly who I think I am. Now, who I think I am may not entirely match up to who I am. And so there may still be relationship problems related. I mean, but I'm going to certainly do my best to try to be honest about who I am in any relationship that I'm in, so that I avoid future conflicts. Because, really, seriously, I don't need that in my life. I don't need to waste time on something that's futile. I just don't need it. And neither do you. I mean, really, honestly, if you can't tell the truth to somebody, they're not worth your time. You're wasting it. And you only get so many days in this world. I mean, eventually, we're all going to die. So why waste even 1 minute with somebody who's an asshole who's going to reject you just because you're trans? It's better to just disclose. So, yeah, we don't have to disclose. We shouldn't have to disclose. And there's plenty of reasons why we don't want to disclose. But in a relationship, when we're talking about forming something where we're actually going to be in some kind of a bond with somebody, I stand with disclosure. If that means that we have to be lonely until we find the right person, then we have to be lonely until we find the right person. And I realize that in transitioning, we probably hurt ourselves greatly at finding people that are compatible with us, that, you know, once they know that we're trans. But the ones that we do find will be exceptional people. And that's worth fighting for. That's worth giving yourself for. And so my recommendation is disclose when you feel like you're starting to become attached. So, there we go. Have a good week, and I will talk to you later. Bye.